My name is Shelley Sackier. I am the Director of Distillery Education at Reservoir Distillery in Richmond, Virginia. And I am also lucky enough to be a Common Grain Alliance board member. I don't know how the hell that happened, but I guess they needed somebody from the spirits industry and they saw my hand up. For those of you who are already CGA members, you already know that the Common Grain Alliance is it's a nonprofit organization that is grain growers and grain users, right from farmers to bakers and millers and brewers and breeders and distillers and pasta makers and every kind of grain artisan you can think of. The umbrella is large, the embrace is warm. We all are focused on grains and we are reliant upon our grains, right? And so I feel really extra lucky to be able to have this moment, this session, to share with you, just to shine a light on the spirits industry, right? And how grains are so impactful to our product and how farmers are so important to our livelihood. We are, very, very close to our farmers. All of them are in our will, and I don't think we would be anywhere in this world without all of their hard work and effort. So I teach this class. It's called a Nosing and Tasting Masterclass 101. And I teach it to all different kinds of people in all different kinds of places. And it is basically just meant to help people become a little more sure-footed on the path to their exploring spirits, the drinkable, not ghostly kind. But a lot of people get really nervous, really, fidgety when they hear masterclass, or certainly the phrase nosing and tasting in relation to alcohol, and they think, absolutely, you have to be born with some sort of exquisite nose or truly talented tongue, right, in order to participate in developing that skill. And they basically just throw in the towel before even giving themselves a chance to use it. And here's what I say to those folks. Do you have a nose? Does it function fairly well? Right? Air passes in and out of it. If you can tell when it's time to change the baby's diaper or the cat litter, then you're all in exactly the right place, because lessons are super simple and they usually last about as long as it takes to make a sandwich. Like a really fancy sandwich, but it will be worth it, okay? So I always tell people that learning the art of nosing and tasting a spirit, any spirit, doesn't have to be whiskey, it could be any alcohol, is a most pleasurable task, made even more enjoyable by the fact that it has to be done with great repetition. Practice makes perfect. So I think that with that in mind, we'll just start in with our lessons. Just the tiniest bit about Reservoir Distillery, which I have to mention because my boss is here, right here.
I'm already messing you up because I'm giving you bourbon first.
No, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You.
How about this? I'll pour wheat as well.
Yeah, no, wheat goes first. Because that's super. You'll find out why wheat must go first. And then I will get a raise because he told me why we must go first. You will all agree with me very shortly. So how many of you have ever been to Reservoir Distillery in Richmond? Yeah? Oh, thank you, Pete. You get extra food tonight. And how many of you ever heard of Reservoir? Okay, fantastic. Hopefully all of you will be visiting very shortly. But we have been a craft distilling organization since 2008, so we are on our 17th year. It's awfully exciting. We're the third distillery outside of Kentucky to be making bourbon since Prohibition. And we're a little bit different from our distilling friends in that we make 3 single grain variety whiskeys, 100% single grain whiskeys. And we do this for a variety of reasons, right? So if you are to walk into any pub, any bar, or across America, any liquor store, you will see that most American whiskeys are a blend, an amalgamation of grains, right? It could be 2 or 3 or 5 different grains, all put into what's called a mash bill. And it's really difficult to be able to discern exactly what do each one of those grains taste like on their own. What does wheat taste like, or corn, or rye? And so we offer you an opportunity to taste that single grain on its own to see what that flavor profile is. And then also equally as important, we give you an opportunity to ask yourself, does that flavor profile appeal to my palate, right? You might never know that you actually have a favorite. So when folks walk into Reservoir Distillery, one of the first things that they see is this beautiful wall, all just full, chock-a-block full of bottles. And it's backlit with all this really nice lighting, make them all super sexy. And some of those bottles, many of those bottles have these lovely medals wrapped around their neck and shoulders, draping, their accolades, their wins in certain competitions. And a lot of our customers are extraordinarily impressed to see that. But we at our distillery know that that is not the metric of measurement that we use in order to identify quality. It's really what's inside the barrel is what really counts. And it's what our customers, our patrons say, this is good enough that I will take another sip, and we know that we're onto something, right? That's really important. Now, the thing that we're going to be doing is...
Can anybody raise their hands who has not gotten the first glass? Oh, well, okay.
Here.
So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay.
Okay, so the lessons... Everybody, if you need more, also raise your hand. We should just have a little bit of slack.
It's whiskey. Yeah, we'll get through it.
First of all. So those lessons that we're going to be doing are 4 of them. I've distilled them down, pun intended, into 4 very, very easy lessons. So the first is eyeing the glass, and this involves color, viscosity, and clarity. The second is nosing the glass, and this encompasses the good, the bad, and the ugly, and sometimes all in one glass. The third is tasting the glass, or not so much the glass itself as the contents within it. And then the 4th is called the finish, and this is just where we come up with all sorts of fancy terms to make ourselves sound erudite and oh so clever in front of our friends and family, right? We'll show you how it all fits in. So we're going to pair each one of Reservoir's founding line of whiskeys, our single grains, with these lessons. I will show you how you too can become an expert. So the very first one that we're going to be looking at is the wheat whiskey, 100% wheat. So,
But that's not what, so don't drink what you have. Don't touch what you have yet. We went out of order.
This is the
When you have that, okay.
Yeah. Who needs one more? You need one?
okay, yes, apparently what you have is the bourbon, but we're going to be talking about the wheat first. You will get to try the wheat, and I would suggest, if you can, you just stole from this man.
No. I've got.
Oh, no, you do. Oh, sorry.
I was just saying I have 2
Hiding
hands.
that beneath your shoulder.
I have 2
Okay,
hands.
I got it. So, just a little bit about me. Now, again, just because I love the humor of hypocrisy, and I told you all that stuff about how awards don't matter, I'm going to tell you about the last award that the wheat whiskey that we make actually got, and that was Whiskey of the Year. And it was granted to us by Cigars Lover magazine. I don't know if any of you are cigars lovers here, but as chuffed as we are that they would publish their opinion, again, it really is. Do you like what it is that you're tasting? Is it appealing? If you do, take another sip. If you really like it, buy a bottle. So the interesting thing about wheat, if you're farmers or if you're just whiskey drinkers, lots of people don't know that wheat is oftentimes used in those American blends, like I described before, as a softening grain. So wheat tends to make whiskeys smooth and silky and give it a lovely viscosity, just velvety kind of mouthfeel to it. It rounds off the harsher edges of those more aggressive grains that tend to be in those blends. And the reason that we advise people to try the wheat whiskey first, we refer to it as a gentle jewel, a gentle gem of a grain. It has such a delicate profile. If you put anything else in front of it, alcohol-wise, right? If you're out there in the world and you happen to be coming across a 100% single grain wheat whiskey, which, by the way, is Rocking Horse and Mill Rare, so snatch it while you can. It is very, very much advised to try the wheat before any other alcohol that night, or day, if you're a day drinker, right? Because you will suffer palate fatigue. It'll wipe out all those beautiful notes that whiskey has, and you'll be like, what's all the buzz? I get nothing here. So definitely try the wheat first, and then everything else follows after that.
Question.
Yes,
Will we be trying the wheat?
you will.
So
Yes.
I should wait?
Yes. Until it's
Now you can try. We're gonna start.
you
We're gonna start in the front. We had a lot more people here than we expected, so we're gonna start wheat and just move this way. That way we won't miss it.
Thought I asked.
But no worries, I promise it'll all be fitting because we're working on the wheat whiskey with eyeing the glass. So again, eyeing the glass involves color, viscosity, and clarity. Now, if you all hold up your glass to a light or to a white background, you will see that the color of a whiskey spans the spectrum from gin clear, that's the new make spirit or a distillate coming off the still, to this beautiful treacle or mahogany color. Now, color may indicate the type of cask used to mature it or the time spent in said cask. Because, of course, remember, alcohol is a solvent, and so it's leaching pigments and tannins from the wood, from the cask itself, all those phenols and lignans. And typically, the longer that a spirit resides inside a cask, the deeper the hue derived from wood contact. Now, that said, there is another way that brown spirits get their color, and that is from an artificial additive called E150A, or spirit caramel. As a side note, Reservoir does not use any artificial colorings whatsoever in any of our whiskeys. All of that beautiful color comes from the hug of our barrels. So all hail Quercus alba. We're really excited about that. Okay, so viscosity is the next thing that we're studying, and for our purposes, the definition of viscosity is simply the measurement of a spirit's thickness. So a lot of people think that you can learn an enormous amount by studying the viscosity of any alcohol, whether it's wine or spirits. If you take your glass and you hold it up again, you give it a little swirl around, you watch the legs. Those are the drizzly bits that come from the rim back down into the bowl. If those legs are slow, that may indicate that you have yourself an older whiskey. If those legs are long and unbroken, that may indicate that you have a whiskey that's higher in alcohol. Now, there's also such benefit to studying viscosity because it gives you an inside look, a peek through the window of that mouthfeel that you are about to experience with that whiskey, that beautiful thickness that is going to be in there. So the last thing that we're looking at in lesson number 1 is clarity. Some distillers are going to choose to chill filter their whiskeys. And this is just a process that's meant to remove any cloudiness or sediment that may naturally occur within the whiskey making process. Now, the argument in doing so is that if you choose to chill filter your whiskeys, you are potentially stripping that spirit of some of its most flavorful congeners, these fatty, oily flavor compounds that are just integral to the flavor profile. Another side note, we at Reservoir do not do any chill filtering to any of our whiskeys whatsoever. We work really hard to get all that flavor into the barrel and then into the bottle and then straight into your hot little hands. You're welcome. Now, again, that said, there are plenty of people in the world who don't want that cloudiness, who would like a clean, crisp spirit in their glass. And easy ways to mitigate this. Science is amazing. All you have to do is bring it up to room temperature. So chances are that bottle has been held at colder than room temperature. Bring it up a few degrees, 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and then Bob's your uncle, Charlie's your aunt. You've retained some of that clarity. Now, if you happen to notice that cloudiness is in your glass, take a peek down, see if there's an ice cube in it, right? And if there is, pluck it out. Then warm that glass up between your hands, just a couple degrees, get that body heat going, and you'll notice that sediment disappears as well. Now, if you don't have the time or the patience to warm it up, you can also give that bottle an almighty shake, and that emulsification is going to help to redistribute that sediment back into solution. So you have regained the clarity and retained all of the flavor. Very, very important. Okay, so now just one tiny note, because I always forget to tell people, if you are not enjoying the spirit that you've been handed, we do have little dump buckets, and the fellas here are gonna pass around, or you could pass it to your neighbor if they decided that it's not too early in the morning for them to do it. A glass for each one? For each row.
You're gonna get a glass for a week, and a glass for a bourbon glass.
Yeah, I'm talking about the dump.
So that when they dump at the end, they don't have to dump it. It's next.
You do, yes, you do not have to dump it. You can drink it, it's totally fine. Okay, so we're gonna start talking about the bourbon, which should also now be in your hands since the beginning of the talk. This bourbon is, again, 100% corn, right? Nothing else inside there. This bourbon is sweet, but it's not as sweet as a typical bourbon. It is very, very oak forward. Lots of people are hugely surprised to discover that 50 to 80% of the flavor profile of our bourbon comes from the cask itself. That is an eye-popping statistic, right? 50 to 80% of the flavor profile. And we're going to get into just how important wood is in just a minute, but here's the thing that I'm no longer surprised at. When I teach my classes and I'm talking to people about bourbons and I'm using the term bourbon, chances are there's going to be someone who is a big fan of Kentucky bourbon spirits in there, and they will always raise their hand and say, why y'all calling it bourbon? You're making whiskey in Virginia. That's when I will politely tell them about this legislative body called the TTB. That's the Alcohol, Tobacco, Tax, and Trade Bureau. God bless their cotton socks. These guys just love to legislate, and they make all the rules for us as far as what we have to accomplish in order to call our spirit a bourbon. So there's a laundry list of boxes we have to tick off. I'm just going to tell you about the first two because those are the most important, and it'll win you points in any cocktail party trivia night. So in order to be a bourbon, outside of Kentucky. I mean, this is everywhere, everywhere. If you want to be a bourbon, if you want to call your whiskey a bourbon, it must be made in the United States. We're in Virginia, we qualify. Also, it must be at least 51% corn. And as this is 100% corn, I think we have overachieved. So, like I said, there's just loads of things you have to do in order to do that, but this is a bourbon. Now, that doesn't necessarily make most of my Kentucky friends happy to hear that just because there was a legislative body governing us and gave us the permission and said, okay, you can label yourself. Still, people are like, yeah, but bourbon is a Kentucky term. Bourbon came from Kentucky, and that's where I am forced to crack open our middle school history books and remind them that Bourbon County was actually established in 1785, and Kentucky was granted statehood in, anybody?
1794.
1792. So before Kentucky was a state, it was actually Virginia. I know. Again, this does not necessarily calm most of my Kentucky friends. But that's okay. That's totally okay, because then I tell them something that makes us all feel a lot better about ourselves. Number one, I tell them, so it wasn't Kentucky, right? It wasn't Virginia. Actually, as far back as 1620, there was an English colonist by the name of George Thorpe who received corn from the Powhatan Native Americans. And he distilled this grain on his plantation, Berkeley Plantation, just outside of Jamestown. So if we really want to be sticklers about the whole thing, it wasn't Kentucky, it wasn't a Virginian, it was an Englishman who first made bourbon in America. There we are. Okay, so now I think the general gist of the question that a lot of people are asking us of why are you calling it bourbon is more along the lines of, are you trying to copy a Kentucky bourbon or a Tennessee whiskey, right? And the answer is a resounding no. Legislatively, we cannot do that. Those names, Kentucky and Tennessee, those kinds of things, those are proprietarily protected by a geography. More important, why would we want to? We live here in Virginia on this beautiful patch of earth. And we here at our distillery, Reservoir, and countless other distilleries around Virginia, we believe in the power of provenance. And what do I mean by that? Well, most every farmer understands what that means, but I can think of just like a handful of ingredients, of Virginia ingredients that are integral to our flavor profile, that actually are so impactful. Number one, our grains. Welcome to the grain conference, right? This is what we're all here to talk about. Grains are so important. It's my favorite topic, mostly because I get to talk about terroir. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but our farmers are all from spitting distance of our distillery. We have really, really strong relationships with all of them, and we look at those grains and inspect them and have high standards for what comes onto our production room floor, right? We really want it to taste great. Another thing that is on that list is water. Lots of people are very surprised that water is going to be such a big, impactful part of creating the flavor profile. And if you've never toured a distillery floor before, you will basically see that making whiskey is just a series of adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting water from the very beginning until you actually have that glass in your hands, in which case you have an opportunity to say, do I want to add water? Like an ice cube, right? Or just a few drops. So most people, many people believe that water is just a neutral thing, but we have to be very careful with the water that we're using on our within our process making, right? So we have filtered water and unfiltered water. Outside of our distillery, lots of issues have to be considered. Is it a municipal water supply, right? Things like that. So if we have those considerations, we know that there are certain minerals and chemicals that might be in water. You might have trace elements of iron or magnesium. Those provide flavor. If you have copper piping, that provides flavor. If you have water treated as in a municipal water supply, you might have chlorine. Although most of us might not have chlorine or fluoride in our water very shortly, but those are oftentimes things that are there as well that can contribute a certain flavor. If your water is alkalized, that creates a viscosity, which oftentimes people will liken to flavor. It isn't; it's more just a mouthfeel, but still that can trigger the brain into thinking that that's part of the flavor profile. And then I could go on and on if you are a seashore distillery about how bromine compounds create this iodine impact. I won't go into that. That's a chemistry class, and we're not here for that. But another thing is, I was just in another session where we were discussing all of the issues that we have with climate change, right? One of the big things for distillers that we are recognizing, if we are using municipal water supplies, is that because our summers are growing longer and getting hotter, we are having issues with more algal bloom breakouts. And if you are not familiar with that, algae is a bacteria. It creates a chemical called geosmin. And geosmin has a very distinct flavor that most people liken to beets or dirt. And I can tell you from past history, dirt-flavored whiskey doesn't sell well. So we definitely have to be careful about our water. So critical resource, it is part of the flavor profile. Another thing that creates flavor in our whiskey profile is the warehouse, believe it or not. If you just look around at this barn, you're thinking about the materials, right? Same thing in a warehouse, wherever you are aging those barrels. what are the materials made out of? How tall is it? What kind of weather can happen in there? What's the floor made of? Inside the warehouse, we are looking at the weather. If we have an uncontrolled climate, then we have to think about temperature, humidity, barometric pressure. All of those things contribute an enormous amount of impact to the flavor profile of our barrels because of the wood. So a barrel, and now we're finally back all full circle to wood, which is, I love talking about this. A barrel acts like a lung, right? So it's expanding and contracting repeatedly based on the temperature, the barometric pressure, the humidity in there. When inside that warehouse, when the temperature grows high and those barrels get heated, those barrels expand, and it pulls, those wooden staves pull the spirit inside the staves. That barrel can hold about 6 to 7% of the volume of the barrel, so there's a lot of juice inside that wood. What's also inside that wood are these beautiful organic compounds. Things like phenols and lignans and tannins and vanillins, all these beautiful flavors that are intermixing with that new make spirit. And so when the weather goes cold, that barrel contracts and it squishes all of that spirit right back out of those staves along with all those organic compounds. So this is happening repeatedly over and over again, right? Specifically with our Virginia climates, cold in the wintertime and nice and hot in the summertime, that aging process is just absorbing an enormous amount of wood. If we want to look at like a contrast, when we think about some of the UK spirits, specifically, I'll just use Scotch as an example. They tend not to use brand new oak barrels, which have all those lovely organic compounds fresh and available to them. Here in America, if we want to make bourbon, we have to use a brand new oak barrel, right? So lots of compounds there for us. Not so much in the UK. You're not going to find as much of a wood influence on the flavor profile in a Scotch as you are to an American whiskey. Okay, another little tiny bit for your trivia night. There we are. So now, with the bourbon, we're going to do lesson number 2, which is nosing the glass. I always advise to people to find themselves a glass that is properly shaped for the alcohol that you are about to be imbibing in. Lots of folks are surprised that almost every alcohol known to mankind has a glass that has been manufactured to make that bloom inside the glass. Now, after you have had a chance to discover all that specific spirit has to offer, then by all means, drink it out of whatever container or shape that floats your boat, right? It doesn't matter. It could be coffee mug, sippy cup, just shove a straw right through the middle of the bottleneck. No judgment, right? But that very first meet and greet with a brand new spirit, find a tulip-shaped glass specifically made for whiskey because it has this. Well, ours has a wide bottom and a narrowed rim. They're called Glencairn glasses. This is just a plastic manufactured one of it. But they're made that way so that they bundle all of the aroma molecules right at the top, right at the rim. And when you place it beneath your nose, all of those aroma molecules make it straight through your nose and then high in the back of your nasal cavity, in the back of your throat. You have a small patch of tissue called the olfactory epithelium. The olfactory epithelium, I know it's a fancy word, but it's about the size of a postage stamp, and it holds around 400 of your body's olfactory receptors. And I know it doesn't sound like a whole hell of a lot, certainly if you are comparing yourself to like our canine or feline friends, but biology is amazing, and those 400 receptors are binding with single aroma molecules and combinations of aroma molecules, and altogether it allows your nose to identify anywhere between 100 million and 1 trillion different odorants. Nothing to sneeze at, right? Okay, very bad pun. Very, very bad pun. Now, there are all different kinds of ways to nose a spirit. I have seen people try to shove their entire face into a glass. I've seen people tilt the glass to one side, plug one nostril, feeling like half their face is more adept at that skill than the other. And I used to laugh at, certainly if you're around a bunch of whiskey geeks, you see people try all sorts of fancy stuff. I laugh quietly if I'm teaching, but I did one day wake up with a cold and I was congested on just one half of my face. And I thought, well, you know, it doesn't hurt to practice something new. So however it is, today all we're going to do is just pass the glass beneath your nose repeatedly and frequently. Repeatedly and frequently, because inside that glass, the most volatile aroma compounds are going to make themselves known to you one by one based on their volatility, their ability to evaporate, right? So in that liquid, you have primary, secondary, tertiary aromas. The most volatile will make their way up through your nose, past the olfactory epithelium, past the olfactory bulb, and then it's going to light up a neuroreceptor inside your brain, and it's just going to kind of flash for a couple of seconds really strongly, and that is all you're going to recognize, that primary odorant, until that neuroreceptor grows fatigued, in which case then it's going to go mute. And because you're such wonderful students, you're still passing that glass beneath your nose repeatedly and frequently, because now you're going to be able to get those secondary and tertiary aromas, right? It's all about asking yourself, what am I smelling? Now, plenty of times when I teach the class, I have people come up afterwards and say, it doesn't matter what method of nosing I practice, all I'm getting is just a face full of alcoholic fumes, right? That ethanol blast, and it's horrible for sensitive noses. So I have been challenged to come up with a new technique. It's actually more of a party trick, but it's a super easy one to do, and I hope all of you participate, because all you need is a finger. Hopefully it's clean. If it's not, ask to borrow somebody else's. Now, you take your finger, you dip it into your spirit, into the whiskey, and then dab it onto the back of your hand. It's really, really that simple. And then blow on that spot, just any place where you dab it. Hopefully it doesn't have any perfume or skin cream or anything like that, or horse manure if you're in a horse barn. Blow
Don't
on that
spill on
spot.
yourself when you're pouring.
This is tough with 3 glasses.
It can be tough with the glasses. If you're done with the glass, we can come and pick up one of those. So then blow on that spot, and then once all the liquid has disappeared, then give it a couple of really good sniffs, and you will be gobsmacked as to how much easier it is for you to identify those aromas, because, of course, the alcohol, the ethanol, has evaporated from your skin. Now, the big question is, what am I smelling, right? Here's your chance to just sit and steep in it for a moment. And I love when people are offering up what it is that their observations are. But, you know, if you're going to say something like, oh, this whiskey smells sweet to me, then I will be forced to press you to define sweet. Because, like, is it sweet like vanilla? Or like flowers, or like honey, right? They're all different sweets. Or maybe one day you happen to be trying a whiskey and it's very smoky. But again, smoke is a broad umbrella term. It could be tarry-like, or burning rubber, or maybe it's like your grandfather's sweet tobacco smoke, or maybe you, like I, had to spend countless years in 4-H camp and it just smells of campfire smoke, right? Those kinds of things. And we know that scent is very, very tied to memory. The more that you can ingratiate yourself with a specific scent to a memory, the easier you're going to be able to fall in love with that spirit that you try. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to say in lesson number 2, nosing the glass, is that we as human beings tend not to memorize scents like our canine and feline friends, like our animal wildlife friends do for their livelihood, I suppose. And so therefore, when the object that we associate with a specific odorant, a specific scent, is absent, we all get a little cranky. Right? We're like, I know exactly what that is, I just can't articulate it. And that's why we use these things right here. These are called aroma wheels, and I have written them for every one of the whiskeys that we have at our distillery, but you can easily find them online, not a problem. All they're supposed to do is just jog your memory. That's it. Not tell you what it is that you're getting, but just jog your memory and be helpful. So, okay, we're moving on to the rye. Do our friends all have rye?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. Well done. One quick sip. We noticed nobody gave me any whiskey to have. I'm feeling cheated.
That was in your coffee.
All right, so this rye in your hands right now, again, 100% single grain rye. It is sharply spiced, but not too sweet. It's very terroir forward driven. And here we finally get to talk about my favorite word, terroir, right? So for years, distillers erroneously believed that the flavor of grain could not make it through the harsh process of distillation on the production room floor. Totally false. Totally false. Thankfully, people with a lot more money and time on their hands than we put together a bunch of studies. There are now white papers out there having been published. We've got the data to prove something that many of us have always known, that the flavor of the grain is just so important to capture. And distillers thought that flavor came from all these other places, right? It was the water, or perhaps it was perhaps it was the bacteria, the yeast that they were using that created that flavor. Lots of people thought it was just based on the still shape or the cuts that were being made that were coming, the distillate coming off the still, all different kinds of other things, but they never really paid much attention to grain. And we really want to focus very heavily on our grain. So it breaks my heart sometimes when people come into our distillery, to the tasting room or to one of my classes, and they say, you know what, I'm here to do a tasting, but I don't want to try your rye, or insert any grain name. We're just using the rye. I don't want to try rye because I remember back in my fraternity days and it was awful, and I'm not going to do that again. I am off rye. And my answer to that is actually a question, and it is, where was that rye grain grown? Right? So lots of people don't think about that, where, we now know, again using rye as an example, that Midwestern rye is far sweeter than Canadian rye grains. Canadian rye grains are far fruitier than our Virginia spicy rye grains. You know, you might find out that you have an absolute love for Colorado rye, but detest Russian rye. No offense to the Russians. All right, but it's a personal observation. You would definitely never go to a wine tasting and have a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon, decide that, doesn't really float your boat, and then never try any of the other red grapes, right? You'd be missing out on the Syrahs and the Syrahs, the Shirazes, and the Cab Francs and Pinot Noirs, and all of those have such completely different flavor profiles to them. The same thing with our grains, right? We know that all of the corn varieties, all of the rye, the wheat varieties that we're starting to explore, they taste different from one another. Not just the varieties themselves, but where each one of these varieties are grown, on what patch of earth. Big influences there. So a couple of other quick things about a rye, which is just really interesting to know. It is twice as expensive for us to procure at the distillery, and it yields about 40% less alcohol. And our distillers tell us that it is a really finicky grain to work with on the production room floor. It basically just gunks up all the machinery, so it takes a long time to clean, which basically begs the question, why the hell are we making rye, right? The answer is, the proof is in the pudding. Or the, punch bowl, I suppose, if you will. The rye is just bold and lively and so exciting. And Dave Cutno, Reservoir's proprietor, he likes to fondly refer to this rye as his Adult Swim whiskey.
Get out of the pool, kids.
Yeah. I like to tell people that this rye was the very first of our whiskeys to win us a double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition, but all of the whiskeys that you've tried today have actually won that. It's just this was the first one, so I give it a little extra love. Okay, so lesson number 3 is tasting. I'm using the rye with this. Whiskey strength varies from bottle to bottle, you might have noticed, and it really behooves you to take a peek at that label right before you take that very first sip. You want to know, how strong is this spirit? typically, for whiskey, you're going to see on the label that it'll have 80 to 100 proof, unless it is designated as cask strength, in which case it's going to have a marking of 100 to 140 plus proof, right? And that end of the spectrum is really going to scrape the tartar off your teeth, which is fine, but I mean, that's great if you are into high proof jams. Also, there's this category called hazmats, which is like 140 plus proof. Those can be, you can't take them on an airplane, but biological warfare. But you can discover that some of those, when deftly made, are incredibly smooth. So do not judge a book by its cover right there. Now, the industry standard for barrel filling, not bottle, barrel filling is 125 proof. But a really, really interesting thing happens in the warehouse during maturation. The strength of that whiskey can either rise or lower, all due to this fancy schmancy sciencey term we call evaporation, right? So inside that barrel, depending upon the climate, the temperature, the humidity, the barometric pressure, we are either losing water to evaporation or we are losing ethanol, alcohol. And since our warehouse happens to be an uncontrolled climate, it's a crapshoot. We never know what's going to be on the other end. So 125 going into the barrel. Now, a distiller is going to typically tend to add water to that whiskey just before bottling in order to set it at a place where they feel it's going to shine brightest. This does not necessarily appeal to all palates, right? It could still anesthetize certain taste buds, and we don't want that happening. That's a process called chemstesis. And chemstesis sounds a little bit scary, but basically it just means that there is an object that is having a reaction to the sensors on your skin. So of course that object is alcohol, and the sensors on your skin are located inside your mouth, the mucosal lining of your mouth. So everybody here has experienced chemstesis hundreds, if not thousands of times, especially if you're a person who likes to eat. Right? Okay. Example, if you like spicy food, chances are you have bumped into a chili pepper or two, and chili peppers have a chemical compound in them called capsaicin or capsaicin. And this compound creates a thermal reaction onto the sensors on your tongue, so it kind of warms it up, right? Makes it all cozy in there. And if you like wintergreen or peppermint or menthol, right? That creates a cooling sensation on those receptors. If you are a fan of sparkling water, fizzy beverages, champagnois, if we want to be fancy, those things have carbon dioxide. So CO2 creates a tingling sensation on the receptors. Alcohol creates a prickling one. So if when you take that initial sip, if your tongue prickles as the liquid passes over it, my suggestion to you, my advice is to play with it. And by play with it, I mean just add some water, just a few drops at a time, because anything more than that and you're going to break apart the structure of the whiskey. But enough so that you are lowering the proof of the spirit so you're not anesthetizing your taste buds. You need those in order to identify taste, right? The flavor. What is it that you are tasting? Also, one other note, I always tell people at the very beginning, you can't do this now because you've already had whiskey, but at your very, very beginning of a nosing and tasting session, don't immediately swallow. Instead, take a sip and then hold it inside your mouth. Coat all the surfaces around your mouth, right? Sides of your cheeks, roof of your mouth, beneath your tongue. Chew it a few times to aerate it. And if you want to practice a really, really cool pro technique, I will walk you through it right now. Don't anybody practice it here because you will choke. But it's super cool. Again, party trick. Take a sip of whiskey, make a cup out of your tongue, and you hold it right there, and then you open up your mouth and draw in air through your mouth and your nose at the same time across that little puddle of spirit. And then a most remarkable thing happens in the back of your throat, apart from the choking the first 100 times. It is this explosion of flavor, right? We call it ortho and retronasal olfaction. Ortho, retro, nasal olfaction. It sounds like a really fancy term. Basically, how I describe it to people who are not scientists or chemistry students is that your tongue is smelling. I know that sounds weird. I hope we don't have any scientists here. To describe it again in more simplistic terms, more like a mathematical formula. Your nose and your tongue are working in concert with one another. So scent plus taste equals flavor. And flavor is a much, much larger entity than either one of those two things on their own. So in the back of your throat, you're having this explosion of flavor and you're asking yourself, what am I detecting, right? Is it the cereal, biscuity, malty, toasty notes? Is it the estery, fruity notes? Is it the meaty, sulfuric notes, or maybe the phenolic, medicinal notes, right? Have you ever had a whiskey that tasted like Band-Aids? Right, there's just all of that kind of stuff. There's so much to experience. Like if you're Scotch drinkers, it's the smoke, the peat, the brine, all that. And you're just asking, what do I get? Again, love when folks are offering up during our classes what they're getting, but if you're going to say something like, oh, I don't know, this whiskey tastes like banana to me, and then we'll have to remember that a banana has a flavor spectrum all based on time, right? So is it a green, ripe, unripe banana? Is it ripe or overripe or rotten or caramelized? It's all banana, but it's all very, very different. So I just ask people to fall in love with adjectives, right? When you're trying to describe what it is that you're getting. Okay, so the last thing that we are plowing forward through in lesson number 3 is that I want to tell you is that we as human beings are very different genetically and biologically from one another. So what I get, you may not. And what you get, I may not. And so if the whole room around you is getting coconut and you don't, it doesn't mean you're not trying hard enough, right? It likely means you do not have a neuroreceptor turned on in order to understand, to identify what that specific flavor is, that scent or that taste is. And also, nosing and tasting is not a mimetic experience. It is not something that you are supposed to regurgitate whatever you read on the back of the box, those tasting notes. It's not supposed to be that you're agreeing with everybody next to you at the pub who says, here's what I'm getting. You block out all those sounds and you take your first sips by yourself and you're asking, do I like this? Does it resonate with me? Again, if it does, take another sip. And if it really does, buy a bottle. Bring it home. Introduce it to your friends and family, right? Okay, so now we are on the very last lesson, which is called the finish. And this is aptly named not because we have finished what's inside of our glass, but rather because there's still something to identify after you have finished swallowing that very first sip. So terms to express a whiskey or a spirits finish are oftentimes words like long or dry or clean or fresh or lingering or chewy. But you can all come up with your own terms. I just hope that you're going to stay away from language like yuck or horrid or awful, right? And if that's what you come up with, then you got to switch out your glass because maybe it's dirty. Or maybe you're drinking really bad booze, right? And life is too short to be drinking horrible hooch. Okay, so the last 2 questions we're answering in the finish are the where and the when. The where part is you say, where did flavor show up? Was it initial entry on your tongue, mid-palate, or way in the back of your throat, right? And the when part is, when did flavor show up? When did flavor disappear? It's the how long did it last question. So some spirits are going to be, again, alcohol. It could be your wine. It could be your gin. It could be your vodka. Although vodka doesn't have as much flavor. It's just was it bright and beautiful and just bursting like fireworks and then disappeared? Or was it something that lasted and grew into something, it evolved into something completely different than when you first took that sip? It could be 30 seconds later, it could be a minute later, it's still something that's changing. Those are very, very complex whiskeys. So there we are. You have learned the 4 lessons of Masterclass nosing and tasting. You've tried all of Reservoir's single founding line of 100% single grain whiskeys. You're all experts. You can now go home, hang up a shingle, and teach this class, right? Yeah, exciting. Okay, so we'll open up the class for some questions if you have them. Okay. Thank you. Very good. Yes, you had a question.
Are these are single grains? Are they single varietal? Or are they a blend?
Some of them we work with lots of different farmers, and because we are very cognizant as to their experiences on their fields, we can't necessarily label that like we want to. We try, but we are working with this project that I'm heading up called the Virginia Heritage Grain Project, where we are working on specific one farm, one variety, and creating a library of all these different flavors. So ours come from, again, we have a cadre of farmers that we work with, and when they say we've had a bad year, we have somebody else that we have to go to. So it might not be exact, but we have hired incredibly clever barrelmen and women who are doing the mixing so that every year it's very consistent, but it is just one corn. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yes.
Do you have a big change year to year, and then do you mix years to obtain a normal flavor, so to speak?
Yes, I just mentioned we have some incredibly well-trained barrelmen and barrelwomen who work in our warehouse in order to create that consistency from year to year. And Dave, maybe you want to make mention of some of the stuff that goes on in the warehouse, because
Sure. Yeah. So when it comes to best practices in production, people look to, say, Kentucky as kind of a gold standard for bourbon, and a lot of times the way that they describe what bottle they have in front of you is to how long is it aged. And essentially, this is doing like a single mash bill from a farmer, certain type of grain. They're blending all this together, and they just go, these are all 8 years old, and they just grab anything that's 8 years old and they just put it together. Some cases they will look at when it comes to bottling regulations. If you're going to call something 8 years old, that means the youngest liquor in it is 8 years old. You might have something that's 20 years old thrown in there. So what you're doing when you're actually bottling is you come in and you go, all right, well, what's the profile that we want to go for? And the reality is that when you have barrels and the aging process and you start throwing in oxidation, the grain gives one set of flavors, the barrel gives another set of flavors, and the yeast give another set of flavors. And that's where you start, but the barrel is contributing over time different notes, and then the oxidation changes the flavors that are in there. So you can pick notes by year and then add them in. And this is more of a technique that, if you're familiar with branding Armagnac, is something they call the assemblage. U.S. spirits are more driven by just pick this year. This tastes pretty good. There you go. But the way that we do it is we do it more leaning towards an assemblage, where we go, here's the profile that we want, and then we will pick barrels around different ages to then create that profile. This is why what you see on our bottles is older than 2 years. Okay, well, everything that you taste up here is going to be 4+ years old. But just on the bottle, we just label as 2. That's the catch-all for federal guidelines that then makes everything compliant, which is an entire another talk. It takes about 8 hours to discuss how one works with TTD and labels. But the general guidelines are you pick one of 2 things. You either go, here's my barrel, and I put in a mash bill, and then after X amount of time when it tastes right, you pull it out and you bottle it. And the other one is, I have all these different barrels. This one's got this note, this one's got this note. I want to put it together in something to create a profile, which is more what we do. And large scale guys just grab all these barrels and put it together, and they go. That might be too complicated of an answer. Did I answer your question?
That was good.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess this is a 2-part question. First is rye. What particular variety of rye? Do you have a specific one? Do you just use rye? I mean, because there's varieties of rye. I'm asking because I have a background in brewing and now milling, so baking. And there's different specific varieties of rye that people look for because it gives you that spice a little bit more. And then this second part is more towards yours in the sense that as you're creating these profiles and you're taking different ages, as you're blending, how are you accounting for the loss in these older barrels? Are you then blending into another holding? Kind of like how are you doing it down to the science where you're depleting an entire barrel from an older vintage? Because headspace wise and all of that, so.
That's interesting question. You want to take part one and then
Oh,
part two?
what we're using currently is Renza Bruzi.
Is Bruzi, okay.
So the question, it's an interesting one because what you're kind of driving at is that when you take something out of a barrel, right, now it's different than all the other barrels. You have headspace, which changes the oxidation, how it breathes, all sorts of things are altered once you take some out, okay? Now, what's important about having someone in a barrel house that's very good, typically, like our head barrelman, he comes from the coffee industry, so if there's any coffee people in here, you'll know there is about, 10-50x more flavor notes in coffee than there is in whiskey. It's far, far more complex, and this is where Nick came from, is the world of coffee. And that's one of the reasons we pulled him in, is because his palate and his nose is incredible. It is far superior than mine. I'd say comparable to Shelley's.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. The people that are capable of actually breaking down those input notes that your brain then acts as a sensory system and then translates, your average person really can, if you're lucky, can get to like a tertiary level, like find that third note. If you're really good, you can get beyond that. But most of the time what happens is that when you have a spirit expressed to you, they're usually built to have maybe 3 notes that are up there, and then the other ones are kind of down more in the nose and the noise. With something like ours, what we work to do is bring as many notes forward up to the top, and then it's kind of more up to you and your sensory analysis as to which ones that you pick. Okay? Now, when you get into, all right, well, when you're building something like that, these guys have, with their incredible senses, they will look, and it's fun because you can go back and we keep reference bottles of every bottling that we do. We go back in time, okay? And you'll notice every bottle has a year date and batch number on it, and that's so we can track them, because every once in a while you'll have somebody call in and go, there's something wrong with this. And you go, okay, well, we pull it off the shelf. And we're like, yeah, it's totally fine, what is it? And it's usually somebody's blind to a particular note. It might be one that we're happy for. But it generates a conversation. What these guys do is they will draw off of something, and they will keep some on the side that as they draw down, they keep that as kind of like a little bit of a wild card, and they track it. But you could go in, we do custom bottlings with people where we'll bring you in and we have these 3 building blocks, and we'll guide you through a tasting, just like Shelley just did. We'll figure out what your palate is at and what it is that you want to do, right? Do you want something that's sweeter, something that's spicier, something that's totally different from somebody else? And so we'll guide through that and tweak it as we go, and we'll be in there, and Nick and I are working with them and be like, okay, well, you need a little bit more of this, and we go, Owen, go find a barrel that has this note in it, and he goes, okay, and he runs out in the stacks, and he'll come back with like a sample of a barrel, and they go, boom, and drop it in. And it's amazing that you can literally just ask a 28-year-old for something that's specific, and he's like, hold on, and runs into a stack of 6,000 barrels and pulls out something like that. They know that from tasting, and they have the barrels with short heads that do slightly different things so that they have more room to work with. But it is true, it does change it. You don't do it with all of them. If you did it with everything, it'd be too much. But they have methods of constants and then things that they add as variables.